Recording. All right, welcome everybody. It is May 6th, 2024, and this is our 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting. Please let the record reflect that Commissioners French and Kearns are in the conference room. Commissioner Jordan is joining us online. Commissioner Cuny is traveling for county business, and we expect to be joined shortly by Commissioner Waldron. We will start off today's meeting with our first agenda item, which is Randy Bischoff, with a whole host of items. We got budget amendments, April sales tax, public facilities district, and then update on cash defeasance and county road improvement. Go for it.
Thank you. Thanks, commissioners. First, we're going to talk about budget amendments for this year, and Tessa will brief on that. Ron, you can go to the next slide.
Perfect.
Got it.
We'll start here. We have a few amendments trailing for 2023's budget year that we just want to make sure are kind of cleaned up. So we have first off some additional revenue to support the extra duty program in 2023 for the sheriff's office budget. We also had WSU extension needed a transfer from general fund contingency to support year-end M&O shortfall and then an accounting entry related to a copy machine lease. We also transferred from the general fund contingency in 2023 to scraps for the vet clinic for some M&O shortfalls there as well. And then the last 2023 item for the general fund was the Sheriff's State Safe Streets Task Force State DUFB budget. A lot of acronyms and letters there. And that was reserves that they have in DUFB 5344 for a capital purchase. And then a 2024 item for the sheriff's office is their traffic unit DUFB. They are requesting to appropriate reserves from their DUFB for a traffic trailer capital purchase.
So what's the revenue source now for the state DUFB account?
It is seizure funds, but those are slowing down. We are seeing significantly less seizure revenue come in.
Yeah.
They have quite a balance that's built up there. So that is, they're kind of using that for now. And I think we'll continue to assess how that looks going into the future.
Okay, I knew they were, seizures were down and stuff, and so that's what I was wondering. Okay,
yep.
Thanks.
So other funds, we're going to start off with a couple of 2023 items as well. We have first the clerk LFO, legal financial obligation fund, that needed to appropriate some fund balance for some unanticipated expenses in 2023. Luckily, they had enough balance to do that, so that was good. We also have the tourism promotion area fund. We just missed the mark a little bit on that budget. Revenues were significantly higher than we thought by almost $1 million, which is a great sign. Means people were staying in our area, and we were able to just pass those funds back on to the TPA groups that receive them. So both Visit Spokane and Spokane Sports. The solid waste fund. Yep. Go ahead.
So just a wild idea. I don't know that this is, I know that we gave 450 to Spokane, Visit Spokane for, I'm wondering, since we've got a surplus here, does it make any sense to replace the ARP money with a surplus here and take that ARP money and spend it somewhere else?
So these funds, we actually we spend 100% of whatever comes in back out to those agencies. So it's not a true surplus. They got all the money. And I think they planned on all those revenues. It was just, we were a little more pessimistic at the county's budget because we also had, going into 23, the change of the Valley left the TPA. And so we thought that would have a different impact than it did. Revenues really stayed high. And I think they increased their fee as well. So it was kind of a compounded, unique event there.
Never mind.
Good share. Good try.
I tried.
Appreciate the effort. Item number 8 is the solid waste fund needed to appropriate $1 million in fund balance for 2023. There was an increase in city waste disposal fees that impacted that fund. The sewer general facilities charge needed to appropriate some fund balance as well to cover unanticipated expenses. All very kind of routine for those businesses sometimes. Liberty Lake Regional Park, this is now 2024. We're just kind of right sizing that park capital budget with funds that were missed in the 2024 6-year capital plan out of REIT, as well as an additional amount that the board allowed for the project out of either REIT 1 or 2, depending on availability. And then item number 11 is the big one. Ron, if you'll skip ahead to the next page. These are our encumbrance rollovers for various funds for leaving 2023, going into 2024. So they had been planned expenses and didn't quite hit the year-end timing mark. So they have been pushed forward into 2024's budget. The big items here I'll call out are the sheriff's budget has about $4.5 million. That is predominantly the real-time crime center budget that is supported by ARP funds ongoing. We didn't know how much they would spend last year on some of their capital purchases related to their cameras and things like that. So we kind of started with a full award and have migrated the rest into 2024. We do expect a majority of that budget to be obligated this year for meeting ARP deadlines. And then the other big item is non-departmental at 10 million, and that is a lot of accounting cleanup. So we have $3 million remaining to be sent to the Avista Stadium project. It was general fund balance appropriated in 2023, $8 million total. We spent about 5 to Avista. We have 3 remaining. So when the matching funds are received from Long Ball, the county will transfer from the general fund to the project. We also have about $6 million of revenue replacement money and ARP indirect revenue that was budgeted in 2023 that we had kind of targeted for some different projects, changed what projects we were targeting, and then transferred. We'll just kind of carry that forward this year, and that will be used to purchase, intended to purchase Monroe Court. We have the remaining amount of revenue replacement in the 2024 budget. So this is just kind of to get the rest of it cleaned up for 2024.
Commissioner Jordan?
Can you re-explain what's going on with the sheriff's department piece there? If that's mostly or predominantly or totally ARP funded, is that impacting the general fund? I'm just confused what's actually happening there.
Yep. So it's budget that we'd started with in 2023 and we're just migrating it to 2024. It is not impacting the general fund. It is all ARP revenue supported. This is just kind of the mechanism for us to clean up. Our obligation is to explain to the public our total expenses and our total expense budget that we'll spend as a county. And so we're making sure that our expense bottom line is appropriately sized through this, but it will be supported with revenue.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then kind of the last major items on here are the Fair and Expo with 1.6 million. That is ARP funded as well. That's the ongoing Fair and Roof HVAC projects. And then the IT 3.5-ish million is the ERP project. So we expect a majority of that money to be spent in 2024. And then the last items are all grants that the board has accepted already. So we're just formalizing any budget amendments for increased expenditure authority related to those. Any other questions?
Any questions for Tessa? Nope. Okay.
Next, we'll go on to the sales tax report for the month of April, and we've got Jason here to go through that for us.
Good morning. Sales tax for April, so February's collections came pretty much where we budgeted. So 5.4 million, we were off by about 0.5%. So I think it was like less than 50 grand. So we're pretty close to where we budgeted. Year to date, we're at 24.1, which is about 1.9% over last year. And as a reminder, we budgeted for revenue growth 2%. So pretty much on target. You can see on according to that graph. And the year over year, you scroll down, Ron, sorry. The year over year sales tax change for the past 12 months 6 of the months have had negative growth, which is a change from obviously the past couple years. Not significant drops, especially compared to the positive months, but still, it's been quite a while, prior to this past 12 months since we've had negative growth. Next slide. And this slide is, again, just a reminder on what comprises the sales tax. And we used 8.9 as an example, just for the unincorporated area inside the PTBA. Scroll down, this is mostly just a reminder on the expiration for some of the sales taxes. So the mental health and chemical dependency sales tax expires in 2029. The public safety sales tax also expires in 2029, and that brings in about 8.5 million. The emergency communication sales tax expires in 28 at about 15.8 million. And same with the juvenile detention sales tax, which expires at the end of next year, which brings in about, again, $15.8 million a year. So it's just to keep it in everybody's mind.
And I believe the PTBA expires the end of 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be STA taking that back out.
Yeah, there's talk about maybe a ballot measure next year in 25 and if it doesn't succeed, then back in 26, but it's what we did back in 15 and 16. So.
And as Jason's pointing out, with that expiring next year, we need to make some decisions about if you're gonna put that back on the ballot measure, when you're gonna do that as well.
At this point, subject to board approval, we're looking at the fall of next year.
Next slide, please. Okay, the economic indicators. The 3 main categories, again, being retail, trade, construction, and accommodation and food services. The other sectors is just the rest of the sectors combined. So not a major shift in what makes up our sales tax revenue. If you scroll down, the retail trade is up. I didn't scroll down just a little bit much, but retail trade is up just 0.5% year to date, year over year. The construction industry is down 12% year to date, year over year. And the accommodation and food services is up 2.3% year to date, year over year. So not a huge change from last month's on those. Next slide. And again, if you look on this graphs, it'll show this is for February's activity. To the right of each of those categories shows the change year to date, year over year. So not just for the month, but it'll include just January and February of 24 over January and February of 23. So non-residential building is down 42% year over year. Residential building down 11% year over year. Scroll down to the auto industry. New cars relatively flat at 2% growth. Used cars down 16%. Scroll down. Again, not surprising, other motor vehicle dealers still down 32% year over year. But if you notice, it spiked for February. It was the first time we've had something bump up in a while, especially compared to most February. So I don't know what was up with that, but people were out buying something. So.
Well, would that be a reflection of the state's subsidy for electric vehicles?
I wouldn't think so on the other motor vehicles, because that'll be boats,
You're
RVs,
right.
quads.
Yeah, that'd be another category. So
Yeah, so somebody found money somewhere.
someone's
decided to
got
spend
it. Yeah.
on that. Auto repairs and maintenance up 22%. And again, that's important to note. Just shows that people are spending money repairing cars as opposed to purchasing.
Yeah.
Next slide. Food and beverage sectors, for the month of February was an increase for most of them, but still year over year. Not so great. Full service restaurants down 5%. Drinking and alcohol places down 1%. Try not to comment on that this time. The limited service restaurants up 1%, and the snacks and non-alcoholic beverage bars up 25% year to date. Which is interesting because in the news a lot you're hearing like Starbucks
Yeah.
stock
That's what I was,
tanked, unfortunately. It's not so great. They lost like 16% last week, I think, because their first quarter sales were so down. So part of this is we're gonna look at and see if the big increase is attributed mostly to same store sales, or if it's an addition to the amount of stores. So if there's been a lot more stores that popped up, we would generate more revenue. So we'll take a deeper look into that.
We just bucked the trend here.
Yeah,
when I saw that Starbucks news, I thought, well, I guess here in Spokane, we're still going.
I know. Yeah, thankfully, it's been really good.
Oh, Commissioner Jordan, do you have a question?
So with that number, it would cover like coffee shops in general.
Pretty much just coffee shops and the handful of ice cream shops that we have in town.
Okay. Well,
don't-
personally, I can say I'm doing my part on coffee and ice cream with the new baby, so that could be playing a role.
Fantastic. Keep it up.
We thank you for that, Commissioner Jordan. We
Happy
salute.
to help.
And then if we scroll down, the accommodation sector is up 3% year over year. So the hotels and motels, still a little bit flat, but at least it's some growth. So for February, it was good. Like I said, restaurants were up, drinking places were up, hotels were up. So some people had a really enjoyable Valentine's Day. And then the key takeaways. So we're about 300,000 under budget year to date. So just 1%. Yes.
So the black line is what is referring to the percentage growth
The black line on which,
on all the different graphs. When it says like 25% year to date, it's just those 2 months in black.
yes,
Got it. Thank you.
yep. So the black line is actually the dollar amount, but the figure that you see is the,
But it's associated with that compared to the previous year.
yes. Yeah. So the blue line being 23.
Got it.
And then again, we're about almost 500,000 over last year's actual, so 1.9%. So February, huge improvement over January. But again, it's just a point in time, just 1 month, but so we'll see how it looks next month.
Now we're gonna.
Commissioner Jordan?
What was the and I apologize if I missed this, but when you look back at 2023, what was the overall final sales tax growth rate?
For 23, I think it was like 1.85. That's correct. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, we were a little bit under budget on that. We had budgeted 2, but still pretty darn close. If we were to pat ourselves on the back on that one. So,
Well, we don't know how much people are tapping out the credit cards and stuff like that. I mean, everybody's getting pretty maxed out there.
yes.
And that's why we were more conservative.
Yeah.
With this year's budget, and when we did the forecast, even next year's forecast. No. Okay, this next one, I know we didn't have on the list, but Ron, if you want to go to the next slide, this is the 4 months general fund budget to actual. The next slide, there it is. It's an eye test, so I'm glad you have it in front of you. This is our expenses showing where we're at compared to budget for 24 versus 23. Year to date, year to date for 4 months, we're at 28% of the expense budget for this year compared to last year. We were at 30%. You will see some departments when you look on the right-hand side of the page are much more than the typical 33%. for this time of the year, but that's because they had one-time expenses. For example, the treasurer's office mailed out property tax statements. You know, that is a big expense of theirs that comes in the first quarter or first 4 months of the year versus the last 4. And so none of the expenses that have the large ones do we see a concern with. For example, emergency communications, you see that one at 50%. That's because we make a couple payments a year to them, and the first half and the second half. So we don't see anything there that's glaring or causing concern. Go to the next slide on the revenue. For 24, we're currently at 28% of our budget. Compared to last year, we were at 23%. Really don't see a big concerns there. You know, property taxes, of course, very small percentage in the first 4 months because we don't collect the first half until May 1st, which we just got in recently. So that is always a low percentage this time of the year. Sales tax, 30%, we're right on target with what we had last year. Charge for services, things like that. So really, we don't see anything concerning there from our normal budget lines for revenue. So that's just the first 4 months. Any questions?
Sorry, so this,
Yep.
this is through April.
This is through April.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
we would expect to be at around 30% of,
Yes, 4 months is 33%.
okay, so,
And again, property taxes don't hit that first 4
Right,
month cycle,
right.
so we expect it to be under
got it.
that. The next item on our list was PFD district credit enhancement payment. I really don't, it was more of a placeholder. I don't have an update there. Just reminder, in 2021, the PFD issued bonds. We let them use our credit, and so we get a credit enhancement payment from them of 25% of the savings up to $2 million. 25% of the savings was $1.2 million. And so I'm working with them to get that money transferred over. This next one, and I do know that we do have Deanna's on the line. Scott Bauer is on the line as well, but this next one is the update on the cash defeasance of the 2019 C bonds. And so this is really for the commissioners looking for guidance on whether you want us to continue going forward with this or not. So in your packet, we have a few items. The first item in the packet is going to be a resolution that if we decide to go forward, that we would have the PFD pass. And that resolution is just to reaffirm the amount of debt that they owe us and the payments, and to keep it on the same payment schedule. This, Commissioner French, this kind of answers the question you would ask, you know, if we do a technical cash defeasance, how do we make sure they still pay us on that one? And I have spoken with their CFO, and so he does know that if we do this, we would have them sign to go to this. The second item in your packet is going to be the bond resolution that you would sign, that Deanna has prepared. And then lastly in the packet is, if you want to do this, it is the report prepared by Scott Bauer and his team that talks about what it would take to defease these bonds. Now, this defeasance, if you look at our future payments, we have $17.4 million of future payments to make going through 2032. It would take, if you go to page 1 of Scott's report, it would take $14.3 million of cash today, you know, based on the current market, to pay that off. Now, right now, our cash balance, if we were to take the 14.3 out of your general fund cash, that would take us down to a cash balance about where we were at last year at this time. Right now, we're sitting at a little bit more than 116 million of cash. Last year, we were about 101 this time. But you do have some other things coming up to, you know, for example, we got the Green Buildings Act, so you may say, you know, we want to use that cash for that item versus this, but that's really what we're looking for is, what, you know, where would you like, do you want to do this? This, in essence, would be like an investment because we would be lending our money for these other funds that have to pay these bonds. And we would earn a effective rate of 4.7% on our investment.
And if we keep the money with the treasurer,
We're in the 2.6.
so we're gonna make twice the amount of money
Pretty
by
close.
defeasing the bonds.
Yes.
And so it seems to me that's
Yeah.
probably the right thing to do. And so the other thing is that that additional revenue will help soften the blow for next year when, or this year maybe, or, you know, certainly next year with regard to cash flow, if we don't have a significant increase in sales tax due to construction or anything else.
Yeah, we will get back, it's roughly $2 million a year, with the
Yeah.
first payment being this December.
Yeah.
But it's about $2 million every year that would come back to the general fund to pay back, this loan or this investment.
So what's the downside? Usually there's a but.
The only downside
This,
is,
this and this, but.
the only but would be is if you wanted to use the cash for something different instead of defeasing these bonds.
Okay.
That's,
Yeah, I would agree. They just a summary of what Randy said. We put 14.3 million into another financial instrument. We will earn a higher rate. It will be over there for up to 14 year or up to 7 years, so 2032. But we'll be getting about 2 million back in payment, and over the life of that, we'll earn about 1.4 million. More than we would have earned if it was sitting right where it's today. So yes, if we have low cash balances, you might look at that and go, that might hamper some decision making, but I think the cash balances are sufficient, and this is a really good return that Randy and the rest of the team found.
Mr. French?
Let's play a doomsday scenario and say that everything goes to hell in a handbasket and we need cash. Is this note structured in a way to where we could turn around and sell it?
No, these are buying, and Scott, I might have to have you step in if I say something incorrect here. But these are money that we're putting into a irrevocable fund.
Right.
Where they are buying investments to defease, to make all the future payments on the 2019 C
Okay.
bonds.
All right. All right, never mind.
That's correct, Randy.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
My doomsday scenario still exists.
It
Okay.
does.
Alright.
If we got into that doomsday scenario, we would need to look at other things such as going out for a different
Just go out
bond
for
to raise
bonds,
cash.
yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'm just looking for, I guess, head nods is, do we continue down this road? If so, I'll get Scott and Deanna will work with the PFD
Yeah.
to pass that resolution. Okay, shake your head.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay.
I was shaking it before.
Sure, Jordan was on the.
He's got a hand up.
Commissioner Jordan?
Just a question. The only other kind of big ticket item I was thinking about is obviously we're going into contract negotiations. So Randy, I presume this will give us more money to pay contracts over time, or can you speak to that piece of the puzzle?
It would, over time, give us about another 1.4 million roughly, which is the interest earnings that we're saving,
Per
the
year.
savings, over the life of this 7 years. So a couple $100,000 a year.
1.4 million for the entire.
Oh,
Yeah, for the
okay.
entire 7 years.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, then I think that's We have one more item. The last item on our list is the annual ordinance that we do for the road RID guarantee fund. Currently, there are only $6,000 debt outstanding that this fund is guaranteeing. This fund by statute needs to have a 5% cash balance. 5% of that is a little over $300. We have $48,000 of cash sitting in the little 48.8 actually sitting in the RID guarantee fund. So this is the annual resolution that you will see on your consent agenda next week to move 48,000 of that cash back to the general fund per RCW 3688-235. That is all we had on this report.
Okay,
And we're ahead of schedule.
any last questions?
That's just a whole lot better than being 50 million underwater. So thank you.
Okay, next up, Arian Schmidt, talk about Broadlink EDA strategic update.
She's in the small conference room.
Is she, okay, wasn't sure she was super there. Sounds good.
Drive test on Thursday. I saw that. She all nervous about it. But she did it.
Arian,
Really?
hello. We don't see you around here enough.
I know. Thanks for letting me come hang out. I
Of
appreciate it.
course. All
And
right.
Ron, are you gonna be running slides? Nice. Well, thank you, commissioners, for letting us come. Arian Schmidt with Broadlink Executive Director, and I'm really pleased to introduce you to our two additional staff members. It's really nice for mental health and wellness staff, more than you've been working on things, so.
I'm Andy Whitward for Administrative Services with Broadlink.
I'm James Adlot. I'll be the outside plant project manager. So
That means the telecommunication stuff that we're building all throughout Spokane County. He's gonna be the guy on the ground, so we're excited. Well, we are really grateful to be here. I also want to say thank you to our board members that are here. Commissioner Cuney is the Broadlink board chair. She's not here, but Scott, I appreciate your involvement and insight on the board. And is Kyle here?
probably online.
Okay, and then Kyle Tuig online, we really appreciate his insights in public works. So what we wanted to do today is kind of give you a recap of the year in review for Broadlink. We just finished our inaugural year. Share a little bit about what we accomplished, a few things that we've got on deck, and then if you've got any questions, go from there. By the way, Commissioner Waldo, nice job. I was looking at the snow and the sleet and I was
Oh
like,
my
wow,
gosh,
this year.
it was quite wet. I was very cold at the end, but it was fun.
Oh, wonderful. Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to share that the Broadlink logo was really created with our purpose in mind. And as you see on the screen, it really represents the three things that are our primary focus. The first and foremost, it's representing the agricultural fields in our rural communities, because we are meant to bring connectivity to our rural, unserved and underserved communities throughout Spokane County, and we have a lot. Secondly, it's representative of a spool of fiber optic cable, meaning we are heavily involved in the infrastructure and technology side of the solutions. And then thirdly, it's really a representation of a helping hand, because once you have the ability to connect to broadband, you need to know how to do it. Make sure your disposable income allows you to do it. You've got the devices, and then lastly, you are digitally literate, so you are safe when you're online doing the things for your household or occupation. Next, Ron. Just to recap, we are a public development authority established in 2022 before the Board of Commissioners went from 3 to 5. We have been authorized by a set of RCWs. We are governed by an independent board. Just as a side note, I have been a little surprised that that is still not well known throughout Spokane County. Some entities, whether they be cities or other organizations, think that we are a department of Spokane County. So I just think that that's part of really the value and why we were launched, that independent board and the RCWs. And again, I just thought it was worth bringing up here. Our membership is composed of the unincorporated county and the 13 towns and cities. And so right now we have obviously the county and 13 of the 9. And then we have the remaining 3, 2 of which are on tap. And the third one is just for just sequence of events. We just haven't crossed the finish line. So we hope by, probably middle of this year, we'll have all 13 on board and really leveraging that economy of scale and voice. Our primary focus areas that we talked a little bit on that logo is the infrastructure capacity expansion. We want to make sure that what we build with public dollars is affordable, sustainable, and competitive. Again, particularly to our rural areas, but that does not exclude our urban core. And also really vetting and securing the concept of what's called an open access network. And that is really, you build roads with public dollars, you don't allow that contractor to charge a toll to drive on it. And it's really that same concept in the digital highways. We want to partner and leverage the expansion with our private internet service providers, but we want to make sure that all internet service providers and subscribers get to traverse those digital highways. And we do that through the form of public-private partnership that weighs risk, revenue, and ownership on behalf of the cities and county in Broadlink and those that we are partnering with. Ron? So we serve households, businesses, and community anchor institutions. That is a term that has been codified at the federal and state level. I think those are fairly common sense. Libraries, public safety and response, civic centers, but also have been expanded to tribal centers, to designated nonprofits for vulnerable populations. So those actually not only have a centroid for not only collaboration, but it actually means something when you build out the infrastructure, they get a higher default of connectivity than just a home. So again, all of those we desire to make sure, in fact, we were just talking with Justin in the prep room, expanded telehealth, mental health and behavioral health, distance learning, obviously personal connection, e-commerce, remote workforce. We will be telling you about what we've been able to participate in assisting emergency response and really making sure that our communities have resiliency beyond their physical footprint. We did just pass last week our strategic plan, and that is a more robust document that was in your packet, and happy to entertain any questions as you peruse it. Next, sorry. So these are a few things on our first year. Next, thank you. So I think a number of you are aware of this, so I won't spend much on this. So this is a map of Washington State that is reflective of how many addresses in each of the counties are currently eligible for funding by federal definitions for the upcoming what are called B dollars that we'll talk about. As you can see, Spokane County sticks out like a Christmas tree. We have more eligible addresses for funding than any other county, and to be quite honest with you, more than half the state combined. We are currently sitting at about 22,000 addresses that need internet. Commissioner Kearns, your district is definitely one that is a focus. And we were able to achieve that as a shout out to a unique approach we did with Spokane County GIS using our E911 database, where we were on the premise of if an address can call 911, it needs broadband. Not only for the reasons we talked about, but if, as we found out in the Oregon fire area up in Elk, not having connectivity severely restricts when you need help and when help needs to get to you. We submitted 22,000 requests. We had 22,000 accepted. So we feel that that was a great place for us to be. That had a monetary value Washington State was actually scheduled for about 900 million statewide of this BEAD federal funding. Because of the additions, we rose 3 percentage points among states and landed at 1.24 billion. So this really has a dollar value. This BEAD funding that we'll talk a little about is more formulaic than it is competitive. And with the direction of the board, we're really trying to make sure we connect every one of those dots that you see. Any questions on that? All right, Ron. One other thing, so that was in March. In August, as a result of what we received in the Washington State Broadband Office pilot grant, we were a part of the emergency engagement in the Gray fire impact area. I received notice from Chandra Fox at DEM that 3 redundant paths of fiber at Eastern State Hospital in Lakeland Village had burned. And so they were not able to connect back up to the West Side electronic patient care reporting system for the 300 patients that had to shelter in place. So we ended up bringing connectivity to them to establish that baseline just so that they could maintain updates for those medical records. Over the course of the next few weeks, that resulted in 4 tower deployments in and around the fire perimeter. One that was able to bring incident command back to Medical Lake from Cheney, and another that was placed at the camp at Silver Lake that actually was the only source of connectivity for all of Silver Lake during those initial days. Next, Ron.
What's a cow?
Oh, sorry, cellular on wheels. So there's a picture there that, thank you, found a cow by the side of it. Thank you, Commissioner. Those were the 4 of the cellular on wheel cows scheduled for the South County pilot, but again, they made a little detour on their way there. Next, Ron. Speaking of the South County pilot, this is what you as commissioners accepted on our behalf last June. We did make the 6-week deadline of constructing, building, and having ready for deployment 9 towers, one of which is a gas-enabled disaster recovery tower. Those are placed in those locations. Just to orient yourself, this is the lower southwest quadrant of Spokane County. In particular, Fire District 3 with Chief Rohrbach. We have the majority of those cellular on wheel cows at his fire stations. Before this pilot, they were responding to calls for service from 1980 Zetron pagers. Since this pilot, we have been able to outfit them with special antenna on their fire apparatus that they now have full dispatch capability of information, and dispatch now can see where they are through automatic vehicle location heads up. And they've said that that's made a real difference. They did say that they don't fully expect to see the benefits of this until fire season. In the past, they have one chief level staff member when a fire breaks out whose only job is to go around trying to find where cell coverage is to set up incident command. That will no longer be the case. So we're really excited. We have households being connected up. We are connecting Liberty School District. I've been working with the superintendent there. I want to make sure all of you receive the invite for our showcase event on June 7th in Spangle. We would love for you to actually, Commissioner French, see a cow in person and kind of see how this could be deployed not only here, but wherever is needed. We will be keeping this going until the long-term awards come out, but these are assets of Broadlink that can be very easily deployable on almost a moment's notice when needed. Next, Ron. We are in the middle of what's called a broadband serviceability challenge. I told you about those 22,000 addresses. Each address has a color. Those colors are denoted on what the federal government feels that address currently receives related to internet. Green is fully served according to the federal standard and is not eligible for funding, but orange and red are. The state broadband office has a window for you to challenge that the green ones truly are not. and that they need to be converted to a color that not only shows the actual service received, but also the availability for funding. We have submitted about 2,000 points, basically saying this is not a correct color code, and we are just peaking 700 in being accepted. A majority of those are in the fire impact areas for Gray and Oregon. Then in one fell swoop, we're making sure that those communities get broadband money as part of their build back. We are also the facilitator of the Spokane Broadband Action Team. That has really gained a lot of synergy. It's an advisory group that rolls up through the Broadlink board, very similar to other advisory groups at the county. We have over 50 entities and 150 folks on our distribution list with easily over 20 attendees each month. We have amazing interaction with our local internet service providers, national service providers, our libraries, our towns, our cities, our schools. We're just really great to have all of those contributions, to include a number of very engaged constituents that kind of keep us on the pulse point of different areas of the community that we are wanting to bring connectivity. We also have a number of attendees from other counties in Washington State, because we are one of the most active and influential bats. So they often take notes and take it back to their counties. Next one, Ron. So we are continuing to work now on making sure that digital equity and access is ongoing. There is a lot at stake at the federal level for affordable connectivity programming subsidies. We have no idea whether that will continue. We are so grateful for our federal delegates of Congresswoman McMorris Rogers, Senators Cantwell and Murray, who often attend our BAT teams. Both of them have, Cantwell has monthly touch point meetings. They are really, really aware of what's going on at the local level, and I'm very, very grateful. We also work real closely with other counties and cities in state policy recommendations. Very often you don't have wet cement, but right now we are actually creating and codifying the policy we will be using for the next 20, 30, 50 years. And we want to make sure it makes sense and has the ability to meet the needs of the different communities that have solutions. Again, we are working on both fiber optic cable solutions as well as hybrid solutions, which means wireless components. Due to topography and granite, you can't really put fiber in the ground or connect to poles everywhere. So we want to make sure that we use our money well. And that is a lot of why James is here with his 20 years of experience in the telecommunication industry. And last but surely not least, we are really digging into the understanding of workforce development, not only through Workforce Spokane, but a number of construction firms. We don't want to be caught off guard, that we want to leverage all of the local workforce and really give them preference and training ahead of the game before these large awards, quite likely totaling over $100 million, are coming into our county to build out that connectivity that is needed. And we really want to make sure it's a continuum of workforce, all the way from ditch digging to fiber slicing to network engineer opportunities, so that anyone, whether they're justice involved, whether they're first time employment, second career employment, have an opportunity to plug in if this is an area of interest. Scott, did you have anything else on those that we're trying to swallow?
I think it's a pretty comprehensive list.
Okay. And this is, if that wasn't enough, this is just a picture of how I wouldn't have an area briefing without a swim lane. So the next few months is really our crunch time, where everything is gearing up in the planning, in the submission, in the deployment and the funding that will really set the stage between now and the end of 2029. Our American Rescue Plan funding, which I want to just say thank you, that was our seed money, as well as a probably flavor of additional match money, will continue to be used, but the new BEAD funding, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Fund, has until 2029. There are a number of other ancillary funds that we are looking to secure. But again, those really just need to complement what we are building for that enormous infrastructure build out across the county. So that's kind of a picture of what we're trying to look at and take direction from the board.
So at some point, I'd like to be able to spend some time with you and coordinate what you're doing here with some other construction activity that's going to be happening on the West Plains, and maybe we can save some money by sharing ditches.
Ooh, I would
Yeah.
absolutely love that.
So we'll
Okay,
have Victoria schedule some time. We'll get together.
that sounds great. And a shout out to Chris Pengra. He and I have chatted a handful of times, and there's really a lot of synergies between the PDAs, not only S3R3, but West Plains, Shrek. It really has been a neat thing to see unfold. So we will do that, Commissioner. All right, well, at the end of the day, the continued request of Spokane County is just really your continued support. I cannot say how much it really meant both personally, professionally, and as a PDA to be launched underneath Spokane County. It really let us shoot out of the gates with success. Just continue to let your districts, towns, cities, ISPs, businesses, and nonprofits know about us. Know that Broadlink is a public entity. We ran into a little bit of a knot with FEMA, actually, who thought we were a private firm. And so initially they didn't want to talk to us. So now that they know we're a public entity, we're able to come alongside. So a lot of this is there just aren't many PDAs out there. We are the only PDA in broadband. So just continuing to let folks know we are here for them as a public entity. We'd love to have anyone who's even curious join the BAT membership and attend those meetings. All the way from why don't I have internet to I want to be a part of the solution. That is what that group is for. And then we can engage them going forward. And then lastly, Commissioner French, you were reading my mind. There's shared synergies, whether that be through initiatives in construction, whether that be through assets. We just had a meeting last week with Shrek on we're utilizing the Co-Road Tower. Are there other towers that will not interfere with first responders, but allow for public benefit broadband and other areas? The National Telecommunications Information Administration, NTIA, Notice of Funding Opportunities has a very broad definition of in-kind match. So we have a hefty match coming up. But I think we're going to be able to easily meet that with what we can bring together collectively in kind and really have a strategic advantage for those that we need to serve. So those are some things that how do we make sure that it's the right fit, but can use what we have collectively well.
Scott?
Just a couple things. It's a lot of fun serving on this board and being at the forefront of the start of our broadband initiative across the county. I remember when we first set up Broadlink, the numbers that I remember us talking about as potentially bringing into the county was around 25 to 30 million. Like that could be pretty cool, right? Get us launched pretty fully in the South County, and then where we might be able to go from there. But we didn't envision countywide, and we certainly weren't successful with a couple of first rounds of funds that were coming through the state broadband office. But this BEAD opportunity in front of us, and a lot of credit goes to Arian for unlocking even more value that is going to be coming to Washington State. There's a possibility that Spokane County could receive over $100 million. Possibility. It's formulaic down to the state. It's not formulaic to the counties. We're cautiously optimistic, but that's a game changer, and that really could greatly expand the reach of Broadlink and providing broadband connectivity to a lot of the county, if not all the county. If it's done well, we're a little anxious about how the scoring methodology will take place, but there's a really good potential for us. So we're excited about that, and the hybrid solution between a combination of fiber and wireless really could be, again, a game changer for Spokane County and the reach that it could actually provide. So very exciting times.
No, you've been working, we had spoken a while back about, with Comcast and the, up in Chattaroy. How's that going?
So that particular project is a County American Rescue Plan Award. They're working with Jeff and Heather on that. I know that they're in construction. They had to change their approach a little bit just due to some conversations with the Vista and the pole integrity.
Yeah.
But out of that, we've actually developed, I'd say, a very amiable relationship with Comcast, to include my last conversation with Terry Davis, who's the local government lead, said that if you would please draft an open access resolution that would be passed by the Broadlink board and then passed to Spokane County, I think we might change our tune at the corporate level, meaning Massachusetts. We might actually play where we didn't think we would play before. So this is huge, and I'm really excited to just see everybody kind of realize this is, everyone can drown in the ocean, so we might as well play together.
And Proterra and Medical Lake, how's that coming?
So the Patera and New Jay were one of the two of the firms that we worked on in the fire mitigation. When Broadlink pulled the towers to put them in the South County, Patera stayed. I don't think that has actually ended up as intended. So we've been in discussion with Mayor Cooper and Sunny Weathers on maybe some alternates as far as knowing that the tower model worked really well. Whether that be through some of their available FEMA money that now Broadlink is now able to participate in, or as we might have some of our towers free up, maybe replacing some there, because connectivity in particular in the Silver Lake shoreline is still very, very limited. So we're kind of coming full circle back on that.
Okay.
So how is your budget doing then as Broadlink, and are you feeling like you're sustainable as you're going through this process of applying for the BEAD funding?
The tricky part is the state and the feds continue to push out their awards, which obviously makes us look at our burn rate closer and closer. So that was something Scott brought up. We're being very careful on our spending. Obviously, the biggest part right now is supporting 3. We are utilizing everything that we can. We are presenting some scenarios to allow our viability through this delta until those awards come in. Once those awards come in, we will be very sustainable.
Right,
So
right.
I think there are some options now that things have changed, particularly related to where the 9.6 match money is coming from and how we can use that. We've got some other things. So the board asked that of us for our next meeting, and we'll be preparing that, and we'll definitely let you know, because we have a limited seed budget that we're
Right.
working
Well,
on.
You're doing a good job. I just want to make sure that we get through the other side of these.
Yep.
Very important applications and.
Yep. And as Arian has highlighted here, a lot of what her and her team have to do, there's a heavier investment on the front end because there's a lot of design work that needs to take place to be able to apply for these dollars.
Got it, yeah, got it.
And you need to have some sophistication and knowledge here. So it's not like you can, chug along with one person and have them do it. And Arian's been, I mean, her digestion of a very complex federal grant application has been outstanding. And so it's an investment that's been needed, but we are being very conscientious of the funds that we have. And, with the dollars that could and should come to us, we'll be in a really good position, but it's
Sure.
that time frame
Yeah.
in between.
Okay. All right. keep us posted.
Pat?
Yeah, just 2 things. One, I was recalling back having the NTIA and FCC at the BAT meeting at Spokane Valley Chamber. I think one important thing to come out of that is as this funding was moving through Congress, there was a lot of concern about making sure it got to where it was intended or where it needed to go. And so there is, I've still been following some pretty robust oversight in congressional hearings, because when it gets to the state level, how it's going. I know last summer we sent a letter, or last fall, the board sent a letter. So that might be something to follow up on. just staying proactive with the congressional offices, letting them know how things are actually working out. So I think Congress may lose a little bit of sight of it once it gets to the state. And then the second thing is, I know we were in touch last week. I think there could be a really good media opportunity for the demonstration coming up. I can work with the commissioners or Martha Liu to at least send out a media advisory, making local media aware, bringing just more attention to the opportunity that exists, but also how the technology is working and some of the cool work you're doing. I know you might have a few guests there as well.
Yes,
So.
yes. And Pat, since you brought it up, I do want to say thank you for the commissioners, all 5 of you sending that letter. We did not receive any response back from any 15 state legislators, the commerce on that. As Scott mentioned, the preparedness and accountability on the scoring team for these upcoming, not necessarily the rubric itself, but who's at the table and who understands things, I would say is of utmost concern. And Pat said something important. NTIA definitely launched this, but every state has a very wide swath of customization. So what Washington's doing with their 1.24 billion is completely uncomparable. It's truly a fruit salad between what Idaho's doing, Oregon's doing, Montana, Oklahoma. So we really have to keep it at that level that we're taking the standards that you have to do and applying it in such a way that it makes sense for the 39 counties and the tribes of Washington, because there's a lot of state control and we really need to lean into that for what makes sense. And to be quite candid with you, the Washington Association of Counties has an amazing broadband subcommittee. And I work very closely with my counterpart in King County, who then right next to them is Island County. So at the technical level, we are working on solutions that can work east, west, urban, rural, and that needs to be heard and recognized, I think, at the state level and enforced by a federal level. So thank you, Pat. We would love to have some media coverage, and Andy will reach out to you to make sure that we've got that coordinated.
Commissioner Jordan.
Thanks for your work, Arian. Really appreciate it. Can you, and I apologize if I missed this, can you give us just a high-level overview of what the BEAD funding is, where it comes from? I assume it's infrastructure law federally, and then what's the time frame on that? Did you say that, is there a deadline coming up on it? Just a little more context there would be great. Thank you.
I will try to do high level. We spent 45 minutes at the board meeting. I can follow that up. But so yes, the IIJA Act funded the BEAD bulk, which is $42 billion nationally. That is managed at the federal level by the NTIA. And then there are 50 state broadband offices who are the fiscal entity. So as ARPA was to Spokane County, NTIA is to the state broadband office. We have 1.24 billion coming to Washington state, and only unserved or underserved broadband serviceable locations. So those dots on the map that are either red or orange are eligible for funding. And it is formulaic. So the more unserved and underserved dots you have in your county, the more, to Scott's point, numbers you have that can be devoted to your county. Those dots, and this is one of those things that Washington State chose to do, they cut up all of the counties into predetermined project areas. Spokane County has 24, more than half the state combined. And so once their notice of funding drops, which will probably be in September of this year, we will have 8 weeks to prepare 24 submissions, each containing about 1,000 BSLs, according to the rule book issued by the federal government. And then we will have a varying degree of involvement in those, depending on how the public-private partnerships shake out. We're in active conversations. But then once those are submitted, we will then be waiting until probably, to your point, Commissioner Waldorf, March of 2025 because the broadband office will be awarding all 300+ project areas across the state at the same time, R24 being one of them. And then we will have until 2029 to fully build, draw down, and execute those 24 project areas. We do have some public match available to us through the state legislature, but that again will depend on how those public-private partnerships weigh down. That's about as high level as I can do in 3 minutes.
Hey, that's good. Thank you. That helps a lot. Appreciate it.
Any final questions for Arian? Well, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate all of you very much.
Great update. Well, thanks.
Okay, next up we have Justin Johnson. He's gonna talk about co-responder programs. Don't know if Justin joined us in person or.
Yes, it'll be,
Is he? Okay.
Hey,
Hello,
good morning, everyone.
good morning. Take it away whenever you're ready.
Excellent. So we are coming back to give an update on the work we've been doing for the co-response project. This was something the board gave us direction at our last strategic plan session that wanted more information before we proceeded forward at a briefing to discuss next steps. So we've been meeting with a lot of people, working hard to get all the parties at the table to discuss what this would look like and getting a sense on feasibility. And I think we finally got to a point where we have actual plan we want to lay out to the board and be providing an update on what that looked like and then what the next steps are. So I'll turn it over to my ASO manager, Ashley McGee, to give just a little bit of a synopsis on the background of it as a refresher, and then we'll jump into what the work we've been doing.
Good morning, everyone. As Justin indicated, just a little refresher on the co-responder projects. It's been a while since we've been here to talk about that. It's pairing of a behavioral health clinician with a first responder for specific purposes of providing more effective crisis de-escalation, improving coordination to services, reducing pressure on healthcare system, and reducing pressure on law enforcement and the criminal justice system of care. As you know, as we've talked about previously, there is co-responder programs currently in Spokane County that pair behavioral health professionals with law enforcement, and those are very effective and run smoothly in our community. And our hope is to further enhance that continuum of response to allow for co-response with fire EMS, pairing a behavioral health professional with a firefighter or EMT to provide a greater array of services that can be provided in the field in response to individuals experiencing behavioral health crisis, allowing for that team to be able to take those lower acuity calls and free law enforcement up for those more high acuity calls. As well as, I'm sure some of you may have seen that article that recently came out about the struggles of our behavioral health system of care in our local hospitals and their emergency rooms, as well as their floors, and the amount of individuals seeking care in those settings. Having a behavioral health co-responder with firefighters, EMTs allows for them to be able to be cleared in the field, hopefully diverting them from going to the emergency room at all and getting into direct treatment if needed.
And really this pairs quite well with our comprehensive model that we're looking at in our discussions with the opioid dollars and various other funding sources. Looking at how we can build out a system that is responsive to the needs of both engagement in the community all the way down to the treatment and re-entry back to the community. Looking at having a full system where individuals can be transitioned as needed prevents overcrowding at the hospitals and really provides a place to go. So that's the whole point here. How can we look at also engaging, but having a place to go? Again, partners directly with the opioid dollars in our plan for the expansion of the SRC and various other projects. So in our discussions with local partners, we are looking primarily for this in fire EMS, and that led us to working closely with two main areas, looking at population size, density, and the response needed, both with Spokane City Fire and with Spokane Valley Fire. Those are the two key areas where most of the behavioral health calls occur, especially for the density of population and the urban core center there. In addition, they are the two that have expressed the desire to want to partner in a co-located behavioral health and fire EMS response. And so we've had preliminary conversations with Spokane Valley Fire, as well as Spokane City Fire, and also with our partners with the Sheriff's Department to ensure that any sort of engagement or coordination of that service, if we were to build it out, there wouldn't be any potential impact to the services that they're doing or take away from the project model that they're implementing. All of those partners, Spokane City Fire, Spokane Valley Fire, and the Sheriff's Department were all on board. This was a big lift to get everyone. A lot of concerns were put forward as to kind of how this would look and engage. I believe at the last discussion, all of the parties were welcoming and open to having this discussion moving forward, and all have given their tentative desire to want to explore this if the board chooses to move forward. So you'll see here, part of those discussion, we also looked at what would that cost if we build out a program of this model. Looking at 4 here in the city and then 2 out in the valley. This would be paired with 2 and 4 respectively for the behavioral health side. So the funding was a proposal of looking at how can we look at mental health sales tax and utilize that to support the behavioral health response on the medical side, and then utilizing existing resources that the ASO already has with our Medicaid and non-Medicaid contracts to build out the behavioral health side. So you'll see here in the cost for both City of Spokane Fire as well as City of Spokane Valley, the proposed or tentative amount, and these are all speculative amounts based on paramedics, which are the highest cost of staffing. We wanted to say what would be the worst case scenario if we were to move forward, looking at more than likely we would not get a paramedic. They can't even get those existing, but it would be an EMT with the goal of partnering with that agency to train them. And if there was an ability to also have the benefit of transitioning them into a paramedic, that's something that could be done. But primarily their focus would be on these. And then also the administrative costs that include both the transportation, any sort of equipment they would need, and also training necessary for the service. So that came out to 1.4 million, roughly. Again, looking at tentative numbers based on what they gave speculatively. We didn't get any deeper because that required more of the board input. On the behavioral side, we have a better idea on that because we currently fund that system. And so looking at $672,000 for that is because we would be leveraging existing contracts and services. So the administrative costs would be negligible in terms of being able to provide that. It's already in place. We'd just be expanding or enhancing what is already there. And so the next slide, you'll see total cost and breakout.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
So when you say expanding, so you mean the contracts that your department already has with behavioral health organizations? You would just continue grow those contracts, so you kind of know what the cost would be. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and what we're looking to do here is if we were to bring on EMS and fire, it would be partnered with our existing crisis system. Statutorily, we have that authority to direct with a provider here in Spokane County that's Frontier Behavioral Health.
Okay.
And so they would be the primary mode of that engagement. The reason we can do that, not only is that part of the statutory responsibility that we have, but they already provide that as part of their continuum with contracts in place.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Because they're out there right now with both police and fire, but at different capacities.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, oftentimes they're the ones calling out for involuntary treatment and waiting for that response to come out because they're not currently partnered with them. And so it can, if they get a call out and there's a safety issue, they can't go on scene. So law enforcement is not only sending out their own co-response teams, they're also supporting our behavioral health units in the field to support these call outs. Again, we have a 2-party rule that 2 individuals have to be in proximity if there's any of those concerns. Oftentimes that other person has to be law enforcement. What we're looking at is, can we go further upstream and send individuals out before the acuity gets so intense that law enforcement can take the most acute cases already there, and then these cases that are waiting for those call outs don't require law enforcement can be immediately resolved and that individual sent to an inpatient facility without the need of having to go through law enforcement to the ER and then back out again.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Jordan?
Hey, Justin, thanks for your work on this. Just to back up slightly, you were talking about the partners and stakeholders that you kind of reached out to and folks are in favor of moving forward. Did you engage with the hospitals directly in this conversation and anything you can speak to in terms of their feelings on this program?
Yeah, so we did have preliminary conversations with some of the hospital leadership specific to the behavioral health side. They're in favor so long as there's some commitment of support for how those individuals will be transferred from an inpatient setting or diverted from those. Anything to support that high acuity, as long as, again, when the need exists that we can transition those people into one of their psychiatric units was of benefit to them. So they're very much on board with this. In fact, I think they would love to have someone stationed there in the hospitals, which we currently already do with some of our behavioral health, because we've tried to work that out. The challenge being the average stay of those individuals is 24 to 48 hours for most of behavioral health. So they're taking up some bed space. They have high acuity, but they only need to be there for a short period of time. Then they're being discharged back, and then they come back again. So this cycle exists before our teams can even outreach and engage them. This would allow for us to do that in the field to existing ones. So that's where they're on board with. We did not get into further conversations because, of course, everyone's interested in, does that mean you're going to fund us? No promises were made on that. But that's where they were looking at, because the need exists for them to receive additional funding to support a lot of what they're doing. They already have those contracts in place. Yeah, this has been as a conversation, a topic with a lot of our providers for some time. And then also with the SRSC, we've had conversation with Pioneer about what that would look like for the transition into that facility. Again, more conversations would need to occur so they could look at pre-planning for discussions on transition, because they work primarily with law enforcement. They would need to work with fire and EMS to have a transition. What would that look like? We didn't get that far. Again, we said the board still needed to be briefed before we even explored that option.
Rich? So like we have with our current co-deployment teams, the therapist is there to help de-escalate and also make a determination as to whether they could go to the stabilization facility or they need more acute treatment and have to go to ER, somehow prevent them from going to jail and stuff. So is that approach the same approach that you anticipate here? Or if somebody, let's say, EMS is deployed to respond to a situation out on the street, is that therapist then going to be able to make a determination that is either greater or supportive of what the EMS team is going to be doing? Or I guess I'm wondering, if you already have an EMS team there, what does the therapist do?
No, that's a great question. So I think there's a twofold look at what we're wanting to implement with this. Law enforcement currently responds, we would not change their dispatch and protocols already.
Right.
But at times when law enforcement's talking and they've got the individual on board with treatment and the provider, the mental health professional that's there, that can take a lot longer to begin that process of engaging. What we're hoping is saying if that law enforcement officer and that behavioral health is finally convinced the person in the field, they can do a warm handoff to the EMS, fire, and mental health professional to help support and engage. So that MHP's job would be then to facilitate the transfer into a facility, bringing up that unit to respond to more acute responses. So that's one way, resolving and reducing call outs with law enforcement on scene.
So that does not involve a diversion to the stabilization facility. That involves helping EMS to get them into either Sacred Heart or Deaconess or some other medical facility. Am I understanding that right?
It could go either way on that one. We're
Okay.
hoping to go to a facility, an inpatient one, SRSC and or many of the other substance use related facilities that we have here, 3.5 million care.
Other than the stabilization facility.
It depends on the need and medical necessity, really.
Got it. Okay.
The second part to that is also looking at how we currently have call outs for behavioral health responders that law enforcement would normally respond to. The acuity doesn't rise to that level. We're looking to say, can we stop that behavioral health crisis before it exacerbates and see them in the field? That sometimes means the IT or involuntary treatment where they're forced. Now, because we're encapsulating it within our crisis system, they can do the forced treatment, involuntary review for forced treatment. And not always do they do forced treatment. It depends on meeting the statutory requirements. The current WASPAC contract with the sheriff's department doesn't allow for those individuals under the statute to be able to detain. They usually have to refer out to another. We're saying, well, let's just encapsulate into one. So when they make that referral, then we've got medical clearance in on site and they go directly in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any,
Oh, just to summarize, you're saying the two outcomes you're hoping to see from this would be reduced time for law enforcement at the ER, reduced amount of people at the ER that maybe don't need to be at the ER because they can be medically seen in the field. So there's a benefit to our law enforcement co-deployed team to be able to go to more places and hand off to kind of the medical side in the field. Also reduced emergency room potentially visits. And then also like what you're saying, going more upstream, like EMS would be deployed when it's not a acute crisis situation, but someone is exhibiting some mental health challenges and they can be treated and hopefully referred to services in the field, not waiting until somebody's in an acute crisis. So those are some of the outcomes we're hoping to see.
That's correct.
And is there a way that we can measure the impact of this then? Like, are all of those data points able to be collected in the field?
So currently,
Or we would have to make sure that they could be, so we could
yes,
determine if the funding and the impact was what we hope it to be.
right. And as part of this being a pilot to examine what is the benefit of doing that, we already require that for all of our crisis response teams. We have
So they
real-time
collect
data.
all that data.
Yeah, it's all coming in. What
Okay.
they're not able to collect is when anytime fire, EMS, and law enforcement goes out without them, or they have to wait for that to occur. The goal here is to say, how can we use that and better hone our responses so we're not doing duplicative work and expending resources when we could be reducing that. The other side of this too is the hope that they wouldn't have to send out an entire engine, so there's reduced resources overall of use in the community to support what we already know. When a fire engine comes on scene because they have to send the whole engine out and the lights are blaring and law enforcement's finally calmed down and that sets everyone off. Is there a better way to do that to allow for individual to be transitioned immediately so we don't have to go to the ER? So there's complex items there. Again, this is the first time we're exploring this. A lot of other regions do it. We find some benefit. We're hoping that will be the outcome.
So do the fire departments have alternative response vehicles that they can use? I mean, the city is currently doing this like with just a few units, right? Like during daytime hours. And they just have one, but they don't go out with a big fire truck, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the goal is to build on that, make it more, not just 9 to 5 during the week, but have responses on the weekends and the evenings. And hopefully be able to use this alternative response vehicle too.
Well, and then to expand and enhance the service that we already provide, because that, again, those individuals are grant funded that don't go through the crisis system. So there's certain things the crisis provides that we oversee that allow more flexibility for that determination to field and then transfer to a facility. A lot of the time, they're just trying to care coordinate. So it allow us to say, now you've reached that level, we're going to evaluate and provide a determination on whether or not detention is necessary and then refer you. That can all occur once we have it within our system. That is not currently in existence. And then the requirements associated with those responders as well don't require the same level that the current WASPIC contract does with the Sheriff's Department. So we have greater workforce availability for that as well, without impacting the Sheriff's Department's work is already in place.
Sorry, so just to follow up, so you're saying that instead of EMS constantly going and maybe having to check on the same individual multiple times in like a month or two, the idea here is when you have the medical or the mental health professional, they're able to then evaluate the person and, like you said, keep data points on this individual to be able to help them get into some sort of service or treatment. And right now you're saying it's just kind of like, I have heard from a lot of firefighters and paramedics. They just feel like it's just churning and they're going and they're maybe getting somebody to some place, but it's not really like what you call it, the continuum of care. There's no circle of care happening. So you're hoping that this could be a start to that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And with work already doing with the opioid dollars, this really is a build out to address that key area. Right now, we know that the individuals need that, and we know that they're currently going to the ER predominantly. We're looking at, is this a way that we can reduce that? I can only tell you that the current data from the national response on this does indicate it. That's why we're recommending to the board that it be a pilot to really examine, does this work? Because it really requires those partners to work with us to achieve that goal. And we may have different ideas on this. It sounds like we're all on board. I mean, the city showed partnership by also building out their CARES team, which does a lot of the community response and a lot of their, you guys saw, the follow-up is non-behavioral health related. It's just a resource management and engagement to reduce what they have is recurring calls for certain individuals. So they did put money towards that, and that would go as a partnership support. So the city did say, in that regard, we're willing to move forward with this so long as you guys demonstrate partnership or willingness to come to the table too, to talk about it. I think that's a wonderful step forward. But again, it's only works as well as we all come to the table and achieve that goal.
Commissioner Jordan?
A few quick comments and a question. I just wanted to maybe to Commissioner Waldrop's question. I had an opportunity to go on a ride along with the city fire department for the current unit that exists. And as she indicated, it is only 2 people, with a truck with limited hours. And so they don't have evening hours when you might expect to see significant need. But one thing I thought was really interesting is the clinician had a little handwritten piece of paper on the dash of the vehicle that said diversions, and she was hand counting the number of diversions that they had achieved. So I think that's in terms of what they're trying to do. It's divert people from the hospital, right, and try to prevent them from deteriorating and becoming a public safety and public health risk. So I also wanted to just say, Justin, I appreciate the idea of targeting this program toward the city and the valley. And you mentioned kind of following the need in terms of the calls. So I think that's a really great way to cover a lot of our population. So my question, 2-part, if we're successful with this, do you see opportunities to expand the pilot or to look for funding that it could grow in other communities or other areas? And then what do you think we need? Are we ready to move forward? What's the next step here that you recommend?
Yeah, so to your first question, I'm always looking at ways to expand. Board's seen this with my various proposals before. I'm an idealist when it comes to really wanting to address and improve the system, but I'm a realist in recognizing we all need to work together to achieve that. So in this, I'm constantly looking 5 steps ahead on funding. So working with the state and representatives of the state, looking at this as a model. And this most recent legislation, they did pass some legislation providing expanded protections for first responders and engaging with behavioral health, looking at the preemptively at what's coming in the biennial legislative session on additional funding. We are hopeful that they will be building out funding, and not just from a WASPA grant here or a SAMHSA grant here, but a fully funded integrated service through the BHASL. So in that way, I'm hopeful. I don't know to what extent. I do think the ASO is better positioned because we do have additional federal dollars and state funded dollars to be able to support this. So in that regard, I am hopeful. I think this is focused in our region. I think that's what the mental health sales tax. And I think that's a wonderful way to invest and see immediate response to taxpayers within the community that are seeing individuals that maybe need help in the street, but could be in a facility. So this is one way to demonstrate that to the community. And to your second question, I do think we're in a position to be able to move forward. I think the hardest lift was addressing all the fears with all the different partners about how this would work in partnership. And I think in those conversations, we laid a lot of those, especially with, would this have any impact on the sheriff's current program? So can we move forward? Yes, I do think, of course, a lot more conversations need to occur on functionality, but I think we are in a position to move forward, so long as the board supports.
What is this, is there any crossroads with the, I think it's called Ricky's Law, sort of the involuntary detention, I mean, is there any connection with that? Or
Yeah,
we see those connecting?
no, for sure. So that's what's so great about our crisis system. Since we oversee the involuntary treatment side, 7105 and 7134,
Which encapsulates Ricky's Law into
Ricky's Law,
that.
yeah, would allow for those detentions either for a mental health condition or a substance use related condition that meets that statutory bar. So yes, that's why we could immediately have that implemented as part of this, whereas the sheriff's departments, behavioral providers, and the current Spoken Fire, forget the unit,
Are you?
BRU unit cannot do because they don't have that statutory responsibility that we have in our designation to the provider.
Thank you. Mr. French?
So I know you're anxious to get to it, is the money side of it.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you've got other people that have agreed to pay for all of this.
Yes.
Okay, just I need to make sure. So where's the money coming from?
So the money, what we're recommending for now is that the behavioral side, we can fund entirely out of our existing dollars and with our contracts. What we would like the board to support for this first year pilot is with the mental health sales tax. Looking at how can we make that initial step forward to demonstrate our commitment to this area and then come back to this. I think the actuals will be a lot less than the 1.4. But I think that's a worthwhile investment. And if you look at the partnership in terms of the graded funding, we're actually getting a better bang for our buck, pairing it with our crisis system.
So to ask the obvious, is this money exist in the mental health sales tax revenue?
Yes.
Yes.
It does?
We're well positioned to be able to.
Okay, I was just wondering, what are we gonna have to stop or discontinue to be able to fund this?
The
But
board,
we have the funding.
yeah, the board has available funding easily
Okay.
to support this.
Okay,
So it's 2 million total a year, correct? 2 million total annually.
1.4 for, 1.4 for the mental sales tax, 2 million, including the behavioral health funding.
The behavioral health, the 672 would come from funding that
Yeah.
that our ASO already has in place.
Correct.
Okay, so 1.4 for mental health sales tax.
nothing out of a general fund.
No.
I love you. Thank you.
No, they don't let me near that. You know, so Randy tells me to stay away.
Well, I'm excited about it. I think it's a great opportunity and it's fun. It sounds like you're still gonna need to cross some Ts and dot some Is, but I definitely think it's worth pursuing to the next step with the other jurisdictions and agencies.
And to quick confirm, are you proposing, Justin, a 1-year pilot at this point in time?
I'm always proposing a multi-year, but in this case, I think if the board is looking at saying, how can we evaluate? You know, our as a shop, we always make sure that there's data provided, probably more than board really wants to look at it. The 40 different pages I usually submit, but we guarantee at least in that we will be evaluative and come forward back to the board within a year and say, is it working, is it not? So in this regard, yes.
Yeah, so I think what Justin would be looking for is just, again, head nods again to agree to commit the 1.4 for a 1-year pilot with a 1-year check-in to see how it's working, measures and successes and outcomes that are available, and then a determination of whether to go forward, and then that would come with a resolution that formally adopts the 1.4 million. But that way the work can begin further with what he's done with the stakeholder outreach and actually operationalizing this thing.
All right. Oh, Commissioner Jordan.
My head's nodding, just for the record, but just wondering, Scott, to your point, do we need to do a resolution on the 1.4 million in the near term? And then he can kind of take that budget authority basically and go, sign contracts with the partners. Is that what you're envisioning for next steps?
Yep, exactly. That gets the board to formally adopt it and identify
Great.
those dollars and then allows all those things to start happening.
Thank you much.
All right, we have head nods. We got one on the screen. It looks like you got 4 of them.
Excellent. All right,
Thank you all.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. It's just.
George is, here we are. All right, George, can you talk about Spokane County homeless outreach update?
Yeah, thanks for having us this morning. We just wanted to give an update following the last strategic planning meeting that we had with y'all. There was some follow-up questions regarding one of our homeless outreach applicants. So we went back to the drawing board, did a look at some of the background, the different agencies. We had 2 organizations that applied for our homeless outreach funding. Chris has been in communication with both of the applicants regarding that. And really, we wanted to better understand the one applicant was a new applicant that we have not contracted with before. And so trying to get some more information, figure out how that organization will fold into kind of our longstanding homeless outreach programming that we've done here at Spokane County. So we've reached out to them. We haven't had a response back yet, but we're awaiting that. Chris has also been in communication with one of our service providers that has been a longstanding homeless outreach provider. So he can share some additional information with you all on that. But more than anything, we just want to give you an update that we're doing some additional information searching and talking with the organizations. We will be going to our advisory committee. The Housing Community Development Advisory Committee meets this Thursday. And we'll be providing them with some additional information regarding both of the applicants for homeless outreach and then potentially having an amendment to their recommendation or supporting the recommendation as we presented back on, I think that was April 22nd. So with that, I want to just give Chris a few moments to talk a little bit about some of his communications with the partners.
Sure. So I think some of the information that I was hearing from this group was ensuring that the county's investment to outreach programming made sense for the county's goals, as well as was rural facing and was kind of the whole jurisdiction of Spokane County. So in talking with the applicant that had previously contracted with Spokane County and put in the application this round, I wanted to chat with them about the scalability of the project and making sure that they could, if they were to receive additional funds or different amount of funds, how would that project look if we were to go with that project, as well as their ability to subcontract to other organizations. So this is something that we wanted to take back to you guys to understand that if the advisory committee made a change in the outreach recommendation, we'd be able to roll those outreach projects potentially together to better serve those diverse populations. So one of the organizations could be kind of your wider reaching overarching net program, and they can subcontract to specialty organizations that are able to meet the needs of those populations better. So those have been really good conversations, and that applicant is willing to do that. So there is some additional fact finding that I need to work with the applicant that we were discussing with before to ask about their application and how it specifically looks with the county. But just wanted to give you guys an update that we're still working on that. And Thursday we'll go to the advisory committee and give the overarching look of how the portfolio looks, as well as what the county is investing in with this intervention type, and then bring those recommendations before you guys for the kind of the final overview.
Yeah, so we'd be looking at probably your next strategic planning meeting, coming back and giving you an update of the information that came from the advisory committee, their recommendations to you all.
Questions? All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Right on time, and Commissioner French.
Looking for,
It's like you're supposed to have someone joining you.
there's 2 individuals that are supposed to be joining. I see Roy Coogan, but I do not see Jim Frank. So,
Take a 5-minute
yeah,
or do miscellaneous while we wait.
yeah, why don't we do miscellaneous and then we can come back.
Oh,
Is he here? Oh, there he is. All right. Good morning.
Any place you want me in particular?
Oh, that's fine down there.
Take it away. You can introduce your guests.
Well,
Take it away.
So, and this is a continuation to answer questions that came up at our last presentation. And so, Jim Frank has been leading an effort with stakeholders in the corridor to refine some of the numbers and where we're at with regard to paying for some desperately needed infrastructure to be able to spur more housing, as you were all aware of, and as you know, Spokane County is in a deficit of over 30,000 residents as single-family homes, and where we're going to put those and how we're going to get them built is a challenge, and needing infrastructure to be able to support that housing is also a challenge. And as we've had experienced in a number of other TIFs that we've been involved in, a couple with Mr. Frank, that we've had very good success. And there's no reason to think that that level of success can't continue as we look at Lake Tahoe Valley and the West Plains and stuff. So with that as an introduction, I'll turn it over to my guest.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to.
I was just going
Trying to get her-
Deanna is on the line if you did have questions for bond council.
Okay, and I also know that Roy Kogan is on the line too. So, very good.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. What I'd like to do today is just try to provide a bit of background on TIFs and how they work. And then provide some specific information about this TIF and how it would benefit what's happening in Lake Tahoe Valley. And I want to answer questions that you have because it's complicated and it's a complex kind of process, and there's details that obviously become very important. And so I want to be able to have everybody, both at the city and the county, be comfortable that they have a foundation of information to make a decision on. So the TIF that we're proposing is based on 3989 RCW. The Washington State has another statute, 39114, that allows the formation of TIFs. That particular statute doesn't work in the Lake Tahoe Valley for a couple of reasons. So we're basing this on 3989, and 3989 is the statute that's been used for the other TIFs in Spokane, the Kendall Yards TIF, the TIF for River District in Liberty Lake, and the TIF that was used for Meadworks as well. I want to go over a bit about how the property taxes are allocated in a TIF, and then the purpose of a TIF in terms of stimulating, private investment. So, the TIF is authorized under 3989 RCW. And one of the first things that the local government has to do is they have to designate an increment area. You have to put a boundary. It becomes a physical boundary around the district. The revenues are collected from that boundary, and improvements that are made can only be improvements that are within that boundary. So the improvements obviously may benefit to some degree properties outside the boundary, but the improvements themselves need to be located within the boundary, and the boundary is the basis for the tax increment collection. So in forming the boundary, I used SRTC transportation planning zones, the TAZ zones. And so those are the numbers you see on the map there. The 4 of them on the left-hand side are in Spokane County. The rest of them are located in the city of Spokane. Most of the area there is within the urban growth boundary, but there's a portion of TAZ zone 560. 560 is outside of the urban growth area, and a portion of a couple of the other TAZ zones have a small portion of the boundaries outside of the urban growth boundary. I don't believe that makes any difference. The Liberty Lake TIF includes property that's outside the urban growth boundary on the north side of the river. That was included in the Liberty Lake TIF. This boundary is a boundary that Jim Frank created. And I used the TAS zones because you end up having good population and job formation information that's been created by SRTC. So SRTC did a study through 2045 that estimated household growth and job growth within each one of those TAS areas. And so it's helpful to have that information when you're making a decision about the TIF. You can't construct sewer and water infrastructure outside of the urban growth boundary. But there is nothing that I'm aware of that prevents you from forming a TIF that includes land outside of the urban growth boundary. And we have in fact done that before. Once you set that boundary, then you end up creating a base property tax level. That base property tax level will be set on June 1st of the year subsequent to your approval of the TIF. So in this case, the TIF will not be formed by June 1st of 2024. So the tax base will be established June 1 of 2025. And that tax base, the way it works in Washington State is that is the tax base for taxes assessed in the following year. So those taxes that are established on June 1 of 25 are for taxes paid in 26. So you won't actually see actual increment created until 27. And so it's important to kind of understand that TIFs are based on that increment, and that increment is created slowly. So this isn't a panacea. This isn't anything that creates instant money, because it's predicated on the idea that if we get public infrastructure created, it will stimulate private investment. And that private investment will then increase the property tax base. And most of that public infrastructure will be created by private property developers. They will be spending the money that will put in place the public infrastructure, and that will stimulate their investment in vertical construction of houses or apartments or commercial buildings. Once that base is created, then the increment begins to accrue. 75% of that increment goes to the financing district. 25% remains with the jurisdiction. So the jurisdiction is still getting 25% of the increment, and they're getting all of the sales tax from the development that happens, which is significant. And the increment does not include any of the state school assessment, nor does it include any local school levies or bond issues, nor does it include any other bond issues that have been approved by the voters. So that the revenue from those are not included. And they continue to get 100% of the property tax for those purposes. The TIF money can only be used for public infrastructure, and 3989 provides a description of public infrastructure and what it needs. But the statute also requires that you provide an initial list of infrastructure that you want to see funded. So we produced a list based on conversations with landowners, with residents in the area, with city staff, with the people at the utilities department at the city, that this entire area would be served by city sewer and water. whether it's in the city or the county. And so we've had conversations with Marlene Feist, the city and her staff about the water infrastructure needs that would be there. And we've had conversations with WashDOT as well. So WashDOT, all the documents that you have before you, WashDOT also has those documents and reviewing them. That list, that project list is not exclusive. In other words, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you can fund. You can fund anything that's authorized by the statute, but it is an initial list. And you have to remember that over the 15 or 20 or 30 years that the TIF will be in place, obviously, there's going to be infrastructure that we don't know about today that is going to be important as we go forward. And so there's nothing that prevents that infrastructure from being identified later and funded. But there is an initial list, and I think the initial list is important for a couple of reasons. One is it lets you as decision makers understand the magnitude of infrastructure that's there that needs to be funded in order for this area to accommodate the growth that SRTC has planned. The other thing about a TIF is that both the local jurisdiction, whether it's the city or Spokane County, has to approve those projects individually. So no project would be funded without a vote of the Board of County Commissioners and or the City of Spokane City Council. So they have to approve the project. And one of the nice things that I've experienced with TIFs over the years, and in particular, the one at Liberty Lake, was it facilitates more long-range planning. One of the problems that's happened in Latah Valley is that there essentially hasn't been any good long-range planning for infrastructure. It's been done on a project-by-project basis. So project developer A or landowner B comes in and says, I have a project. The city says, well, in order to do that project, you have to do A, B, and C. And there isn't a thoughtful, long-term looking ahead at an area as a region or as a larger neighborhood and saying, in order for the growth that we have anticipated for this neighborhood to happen, these are the things that we need to do, and this is how it's going to be financed. Because there is no financing, that kind of long-range planning doesn't occur. So the TIF allows that planning to occur, and you really see it in Liberty Lake. There's an annual report that comes out with each TIF, and as part of that annual report, Liberty Lake's looking 2 and 3 and 4 years into the future about projects that are going to be funded, how much money is in the fund, how much money is going to come into the fund, what projects do we see on the horizon. So there's much better planning framework that is enabled by the formation of a TIF. So that's kind of the fundamentals, I guess, of how a TIF operates. And at this point, I'm happy to stop for a second and see if there's any questions that anyone has about any of that. Otherwise, I would just go into some specifics of this Latah Valley West Plains TIF.
Any questions at this point, or do we want to keep moving?
Okay.
We're good.
So in this particular TIF, if you use the task zones that was identified on the map, the SRTC has estimated household growth and the employment growth in those task zones. And so the city of Spokane, 3,448 units, Spokane County, 2,266 units. And then on the employment side, the city of Spokane, 547, and Spokane County, 2,565. So that's the growth that SRTC has estimated will occur in this area represented by those task zones between now and 2045. The first thing to understand is this growth will not happen. This growth is impossible without significant infrastructure. If that infrastructure is not created, these growth numbers will not in reality occur. And so that there's necessary infrastructure that needs to happen. And that's evidence already by the city in 23 and 24, imposing a growth moratorium on Latah Valley. And the city's council's actually at their public safety subcommittee is considering another moratorium for this area. So, and the reality is that the concerns that have been raised by the neighbors in that area are real and they are justified. There's a lot of things that have happened there that, while specific individual projects have been approved, not a lot of thought has been given to like long-term issues and consequences. And so there are water system deficiencies that need to be corrected. And we have to understand that how important getting a solid foundational sewer and water system established for not only the valley, but the West Plains, how important that is. Because only the city of Spokane has the water rights, the water system capacity, and the ability to serve the West Plains area and to serve Latah Valley. There is no other option. And the road system is, we have a road system now where people use I-90 or 195, State Route 195 to go to the grocery store. Because there is no arterial system. There's no connected arterial system that allows people to drive from West Plains Geiger area into the city of Spokane. There's no connection from Thorpe Road to Marshall Road. So it just is not an interconnected transportation system. And so that's really what's created the problems on 195 and a lot of the crisis is that everybody goes onto 195 to go to the grocery store, bring their kids to school, go to the doctor. There has to be a connected arterial system. And so, and without that, this growth cannot happen. It just will not happen. So I think I talked about, you know, the road, sewer, water infrastructure that's necessary. And so the idea is that in order for this private investment to happen, this public infrastructure needs to happen. And TIFs rely on the private sector to build the infrastructure and then ultimately get reimbursed from this property tax increment that's being created and developer fees. And so there's TIF money that comes into this picture, but there's also significant development fees. And so on the sewer and water connection side and on the transportation mitigation fee side, there's $75 million of financing here that's coming directly from those developer fees. The rest of it is coming from growth, new growth. None of the infrastructure here is being paid for out of general fund money, all being paid for by growth. And developers make the improvements and ultimately get reimbursed. But I can tell you that reimbursement comes down the road a long ways. It'll be 10 years or more before some people that make improvements in 25 or 26 will actually get reimbursed, because you have to go through this long, elaborate process of the infrastructure being put in, then the private houses or businesses being created, and that property tax, those structures being put on that property tax rolls, and then that property tax is actually collected. And so I can, so the it is possible, and the statute does allow the municipality, whether it's the city of Spokane or Spokane County, to issue bonds to construct certain infrastructure. And it's possible within this district, as you get down the road at some point, that may be something that you want to consider. There are a couple of really big projects in here. The Thorpe Road tunnels that are now very narrow and the city considers a safety problem. And then you have to build, in order to get a connected arterial system, you have to build a bridge over 195 at Thorpe Road. So these are big projects. These are 20, 30, 40 million dollar projects. And there may be a point down the road where there's enough money coming into the TIF that would support a bond issue. And it may be that a bond issue would be used for some larger projects, but I think most of the projects will be developer constructed. But that option for a bond issue is there if it's necessary. The other thing is both the city and county can be reimbursed. So if the city, for example, it may be that there are sewer and water facilities that the city desires to build themselves and then seek reimbursement, then the city can be reimbursed from the TIF money. It's not just developers, but it's whoever actually constructs those improvements. So that's also permitted under the statute. The projects, we put together that initial project list, and you have 92 million in transportation projects and utility 36 million. And then we put 40 million in community facilities, and the community facilities includes fire station. It includes a community center of some sort, and includes parks and recreation facilities. And we also included enough money in there to provide some green space buffer that provides a wildfire and wildlife interface through the area, so that you've got corridors for wildlife, and you've got a way to have managed open space that provides a buffer for wildfire situations. So none of this, we're not saying that this is actually what you're going to spend the money on, but it shows you the range of things that we think, in the conversations I've had with various stakeholders, that are necessary and issues in that area. And then there's a map that just shows where some of those projects are located. We've talked about the transportation projects and the development piece and so forth. I think that the kind of the final two things I'd like to talk about is that the TIF does permit funding of affordable housing. And so this was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago. It provides for the funding of permanently affordable housing. And permanently affordable housing means that you're serving populations that make less than 80% of median income, and that housing has a covenant of some sort that makes it permanent. And so this is very similar to the program that Habitat has. Habitat puts a covenant on their properties when they sell them, and to make them permanently affordable. So if the property is sold, it has to be sold to someone making 80% of the income, or Habitat buys the house back. You have the option of using the money for affordable housing, and you can do that on a case-by-case basis. I think just the reality of this particular area is that, at least in the initial years, it probably needs to be a priority on spending the money for infrastructure, because that's a serious need. You need to have that infrastructure in place. But as the district matures and there's the opportunity to use that money for affordable housing, that is happening in the West Quadrant TIF in Kendall Yards. They're now using a significant portion of the money out of the West Quadrant TIF for affordable housing. Habitat just recently got a $500,000 TIF grant to do housing in West Central. And the city of Liberty Lake is looking at doing an affordable housing program. They're in the last 5 years of their TIF in Liberty Lake, and they're looking at doing an affordable housing program that might allocate as much as $1 million a year to affordable housing. So that's an option here as well. And then there's a broad history of success with using TIFs to stimulate private investment in the region. And not only the ones I had listed here, but also want to mention Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene had a TIF that was what they called the Lake City Development Corporation. That's just terminated a few years ago. But the infrastructure that you see in Midtown in downtown Coeur d'Alene and the improvements along the river and along the riverfront were largely funded by the TIF. And that TIF stimulated a lot of the private investment that you see. And the consequences of what's happened in Coeur d'Alene are enormous. If you go back 15 years and look at what Coeur d'Alene was, and then you look at it today, it's remarkable, the economic transformation that's happened in Coeur d'Alene. And a lot of that was driven by the infrastructure that was put in place by the Lake City Development Corporation. The successes here, the River District is a huge success for Liberty Lake. A lot of major infrastructure has been created because of that TIF. The median family income in Liberty Lake today is $125,000. The median family income in the state of Washington is $84,000. The median family income in the city of Spokane is $55,000. That lets you know the seriousness of the problem in getting housing constructed in the city of Spokane. And this area in Latah Valley and West Plains is a very logical area for future housing development. It's close to downtown. It's close to the job base. And that job base that's being created in that area needs houses. And you need to be able to support the kind of growth that SRTC's planned in that area. If you don't, the consequence of that simply is that growth goes someplace else. If you don't build the infrastructure, it goes someplace else. And that someplace else is going to be the Rathdrum Prairie. There's 20 or 30,000 acres on the Rathdrum Prairie that are open for development. And those jurisdictions in North Idaho are all making huge, significant investments in infrastructure. And that will be very, very difficult to overcome if we don't provide the same kind of opportunity and infrastructure in Spokane and in Spokane County and the West Plains. The consequence will be a movement of that population base to North Idaho, and with it, the retail tax base and the job growth base that goes with it. So that's the reason really that I'm so passionate about all of this. I don't have any significant holdings in the Latah Valley or this area. We have a small 20-acre parcel that we're talking to Habitat about committing that property to Habitat. But for me, I grew up in Spokane. I understand what the potential for Spokane is. I see us falling behind in some ways on housing, and I think that this is really important. And so I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Well, and to piggyback a little bit on what Jim is talking about, last week, Commissioner Kearns and I attended a meeting out in the valley talking about housing and the Growth Management Act and the shift in demographics. And with the new energy code, the cost differential now for a house built in Spokane County versus Kootenai County and Rathdrum Prairie is now $80,000 for the same house, 2,500 square foot house, 2-car garage and stuff. And so if we don't do something to start turning this around and building more housing in this county, what Jim is warning us about is going to become our reality. And so we need to be able to invest in, we just finished capital facilities plan that accommodated our comprehensive plan update as a result of the mitigated or mediated settlement. And that's just the plan. That's not the funding of it. Of course, we've got proposed funding for that, but this is a proposal that self-funds itself. And so that's why it's, in my opinion, so critical that we move forward with this and take the steps to put this in place and work with the city across the river to try and persuade them that the value for both the city and the county is to start allowing for housing to be built close to the downtown area within the UGA, that area that's just slightly outside the UGA. We're gonna be adjusting the boundary in 2026. So by the time all of this is put into place, that might not be the issue anymore. But it doesn't matter, it's still allowed, and we still can move forward with that. Go ahead.
One thing I meant to mention, I forgot, I did meet a week and a half ago with the mayor and her staff at the city and talked about this. And there was, I think what I'd call good, strong support from the city staff and from the mayor regarding this as an option. I told the mayor at that point that she needed to write a letter to the Board of County Commissioners. If the city was interested in this, they needed to let the board know that, because I think at your last meeting, the issue came up, you know, like, why are we doing this if the city's not interested? So we need to have that confirmation. So the mayor has instructed her staff to send a letter, and it has been sent to your staff. The letter came from Steve McDonald, the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the city, from Marlene Feist, the Director of Utilities, and from Spencer Gardner, the Planning Director. They sent a letter to your staff expressing their interest in looking at this further. So you do have that letter from the city, and the city does have an interest in pursuing this. I think some time needs to be taken, not only from your side to make sure that you have a foundation of information you feel like you need to make a decision, but the city needs the same opportunity. There's no city council member that I'm aware of that was on the city council when the Kenwood Arch tip was approved. And so it's the process, and the idea of a TIF is brand new to a lot of the city council members. And they need to go through a process of creating a foundation of information that makes them comfortable in making a decision. And so there's a process to go through with them. And I'm hoping to have the opportunity to meet with them as I'm meeting with you, and do the same thing with them. At some point, I think they'd like to have a joint meeting with the city council and the Board of County Commissioners. I think there'd be value in that for you to talk to each other about it. There's no urgency in the sense that a decision just needs to be made by June 1st of 25. But at the same time, there's some momentum around this, and I don't think it should, I'd hate to see it drag on and not being able to take advantage of the momentum. But that doesn't mean that you need to hurry this. There needs to be an opportunity for a thoughtful decision.
Do you know who sent the letter and when? I haven't seen that letter from the city. I don't know if anyone else has received it.
I have a copy of it. It went to,
I have not.
it went,
Yeah, I
It
have-
it
I
could have
have-
been Mr. Simmons.
Oh, did you get it, Scott?
Well, I have an email. I just was pulling it up as Jim was talking. It just indicates, I'll forward it all to you. Just indicates we're aware of the conversation and we're doing some internal work on a comprehensive strategy. We look more forward to discussing the future. It's pretty general. That's why I didn't really react to it. I'll forward it over to all of you.
Okay.
I mean, you're just in a situation where people don't want to make, I'm in favor of something, I don't even know what it is.
Right.
You know, so there's issues and foundation to be established
Right.
there.
Right.
I can tell you in my conversations with the mayor and the staff that they are very interested in this.
Okay.
And I asked them to send a letter, and that's what they sent. So.
That helps me understand why I got that.
You're the one, I get this email.
What's the saying?
Well, and I think that if I was at the city, I think that these infrastructure projects that you highlight, you know, especially the transportation projects, do those exist on any of their 6-year plans or 20-year plans today? Are they new? Are they ones that were already contemplated like that? The public works side of this, I'm hoping that they're looking at what these key transportation projects are and what the costs are, because I didn't know if the bridge over 195, was that already contemplated in the past? I don't remember seeing
They're
that.
actually working on a design of it.
Okay,
So like
So-
Inga Notes working on a
okay,
design.
so
of
that is in their
it.
thought
Not-
process,
It's in their thought process.
but it's not in any official plan yet.
Not all of it is. And some of these, I'm gonna say that 3/4 of these projects are in their capital facilities planning, but a number of them are not. And it's one of the criticisms that I had of the work that they did when they updated their transportation mitigation fees. They did it in such a hurried manner. They did it during the moratorium. And they did it in such a hurried manner that they didn't identify all the projects that were needed, and there was no time for a process. Even the neighbors, I had a meeting with the neighborhood council in Grandview and asked them, are you aware of the projects that the cities adopted and are going to be funded by their mitigation fees? And they said, we haven't the slightest idea. What are they? You know, and then I tell them what they are, and they say, well, what about this and this? Because you know, we don't have a second route out of this neighborhood.
Right,
It's not even
right.
on the list. You know, so it's what I referred to before. The planning had just been done based on who's submitting a project and what do I need to approve that project.
Yeah.
It's not any sort of comprehensive planning. And so some things that should be on the capital plan are not.
Right.
And what will come out of this process, I hope, is a better look at all that infrastructure and get better planning for this area. And also, you know, you need to make a decision too. Like, do you want this to happen? Like, do you want those numbers that SRTC has in there? Do you want that to happen? If you don't want it to happen, well then don't do this, you know, don't build the infrastructure and just plan for that growth someplace else. Okay. But if you want that growth, this is urban growth boundary. If you want that growth to happen in the urban growth boundary, then somehow this infrastructure has to take place. And if this isn't the mechanism, then what is the mechanism? What's the plan?
Okay, you know as well as I do, the only other source of money the city would have to be able to fund this would be the general fund, and that's not gonna happen anytime in the near future. Otherwise, you're going to the state, and the state has already said, no, we don't have any money in the coffer. So some of these
It's
projects
gonna be hard
are
enough.
local projects, not state projects.
Yeah.
But they're local projects that support the state infrastructure. And so that's one of the reasons why the state has said, we're not going to approve any more projects until you start making an investment in infrastructure. So a lot of these things are, well, some of this stuff, the frontage road, 25 years overdue. The city committed to doing that in 1999. I know because I was there, part of that. But here we are 25 years later, and not a nickel has been spent on it. This allows for that to start happening.
And I think the other really important thing here that I didn't mention is the ability to leverage this money.
Yeah.
And that's really what Liberty Lake did. You know, they built here's a little city of 15,000 people. And they built a $25 million bridge over I-90. A bridge that honestly WashDOT didn't want, didn't care about. They had no reason to do this. The city of Liberty Lake wanted it. And Steve Peterson, the mayor at the time, just went to the legislature and dangled $10 million and said, we've got $10 million of money here. And if you do part of it, we'll do part of it. And when you go to the legislature and say, if you're begging, you don't have as much success as you do if you say, hey, I've got my share and we want you to participate. So this creates that opportunity to leverage your money much better than you'll be able to do it if you don't have anything.
Well, and to piggyback on that, when Josh and I were meeting with Federal Highways in DC, they were talking about the fire hazards and rail hazards, and said that they now have discretionary funds available to partner with communities to eliminate rail hazards that provide an obstacle to get to respond to a fire. So the bridge situation at Thorpe and 16th, we could get some rail money from feds to rebuild those bridges if we had a local match. We don't even have the local match. That's what this would provide, is that local match. But is that accurate?
Yeah, no, it was the thing that stood out to me was when we presented something, it was like, well, have you heard of this program? Have you heard of this and that was one of the programs that they
Yeah.
brought up was,
Yeah.
there's this other pot of money out there, so it seems that feds are creating a lot of pots of money right now.
Lots of money.
So,
You
But you
just
gotta
have to,
bring your.
you just have to have the match and then you can play the game.
Yeah,
I think
and
they
that-
call it
that
the
was what they
ante.
followed it up with was, yeah, and every pot had a different percentage as far as the match.
Well, I think,
Commissioner,
I was just gonna quickly I know Commissioner Jordan has his hand up, as the growth management update process is happening, I mean, I would assume the city's gonna be looking at this area and whether they can support the growth or not. And, so the time frame that you're talking about over the next, by that June 2025 date. Because, the cost of these projects, like you said, Inga's working on a design. There may be a cost benefit to the city of investing more or investing in other areas of the city. And that's just my thought process, but they're gonna have to go through that in their planning process as well. What can they afford? But this gives, one option for,
But this doesn't come out of the
Finance.
general fund. If the city wants to invest other money into other areas, they can do that with general fund money. This doesn't take any general fund money. This is all locally supported by developer activity.
didn't wanna cut off Mr. Thank you.
Commissioner Jordan?
Just want to say thanks, Jim. Really appreciate the presentation, the information. Just maybe a clarification on the process for Deanna. This is not the type of TIF that requires under RCW the project analysis by staff and kind of the notification to OFM. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah,
This is Deanna, that's correct.
Okay. Personally, I echo what
Uh-oh.
Oh, you muted. You muted yourself, Commissioner Jordan.
Ron, are you muting me again? Come on, Ron. I'm being silenced yet again. No, I just wanted to say, I agree with Jim. I think some process of dialogue and due diligence is called for. I think it'd be good to hear from some of our staff about this concept, budget, planning, public works in particular, just to kind of have them weigh in and help us get that education and informational piece as well. So even though we don't have a staff report that's required by RCW, I do think that some of that would be a useful piece of the puzzle here.
Yeah, I'll weigh in. I think this is great, what I've seen right now. I mean, I'm comfortable moving the process forward. I think the last TIF we did, we asked the treasurer's office to kind of get their eyes on it, have theirs, and the assessor's office. I think we had those two departments kind of take a look, sort of bless the numbers, and if they think everything looks correct. And yeah, I mean, the email that Scott just sent to us, it says, we look forward to productive discussions in the future, including the possibility of a joint meeting of elected officials from the city and the county. So I think, I think, well, we set that up with the treasurer's office, budget office, and everyone crunch the numbers and make sure we're all on the same page and move forward.
yeah.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Oh, yep.
Oh, sorry. I just have one more question.
You already spoke.
Oh, I didn't know we had quotas
Mute
today.
it, Ron. Mute it, Ron.
Sorry, if I may, was curious, I may have missed this in the documents, Jim, but do you have a sense of how many housing units are currently within that boundary? I'm just trying to get a sense of scale with the projection relative to what the current population of that area is.
Commissioner Jordan, my recollection is there's about 2,500 existing houses based on that. The TAS zones each identified the existing residential units in each TAS zone as well. I think it's around 2,500. My recollection in just going through the work that we did with the city on the transportation mitigation fee plan that they adopted. This will double or triple, the current housing population in Lake Top Valley and West Plains area.
So. Just.
Thank you.
So this area has been identified by the city and the county as an ideal area for residential development. We have it in both our comp plans. It's been in the city's comp plan since 2001, as well as the county's. And while we've identified this area for development, we have not made the investments necessary to support development. And what Jim has brought forward is a strategy to be able to meet those infrastructure requirements and stuff. So if we are in fact going to be true to our commitment with regard to providing more housing, this is clearly an opportunity to be able to do that. And we have somebody, the quality of Mr. Franks, that has been through this process a number of times before, that's put together what I think is an outstanding package. So the county has got a very good track record of how to do this. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't produce an infrastructure package that would spur more affordable housing in and near downtown Spokane. So I'm in favor of taking this to the next step, and let's see where the partnership is with the city so that we can move forward.
Okay. All right, so do we want to ask Randy and his staff to take a look at this? Do we also can reach out to the treasurer's office and share the numbers with them? And Scott, do you want to sort of further the conversations with Marlene and see if we can get something? I assume we're not going to get a joint meeting in the next week or two. That's probably going to, with 5 schedules on our side and
Yeah, we can find out.
potentially 8 on their side, might be tough.
They're,
Get the ball rolling at least.
we'll see what they've got plans based on their indication of doing some deeper dives on that.
Well, they do study sessions, I think, still on Thursday. And Thursdays are relatively open days for the majority of us in terms of other boards and committees that we have to participate in. So it would seem to me that there's a window of opportunity for us to sit down and craft a path forward.
Possibly think about developing a letter as well to go to the mayor and city council that kind of outlines some of these concepts and asking for some time to meet and talk further and see if get some opportunities to get on the same page and directions as the next steps. Other ideas?
Yeah, I think formalizing it a little bit more than the email that we got. So that we can start charting a path forward, I think would be very appropriate, and asking for that joint meeting.
I think it'd be good to hear from their electeds, just like you all are having the conversation here. What's the level of appetite and interest from their electeds? Because it's gonna take some action in their part.
It would be nice if before they form that opinion, they could at least have the opportunity to confer with their staff as to, if not this, then what?
Yeah.
Because I don't think there is a then what, other than Western Prairie. Okay.
I think that the biggest question mark for me is the housing growth numbers. I know SRTC has to do projections way far out. But I guess I would be surprised if our current land use and zoning in the areas that are identified on the map that are Spokane County would get to that number of units. Is there an assumption that we change our land use and zoning to become really?
No, that's all based on your current land use zoning. I mean, this is hard because I think the whole issue around planning and density is evolving quite rapidly with some of the new laws at the state level and the rest of it. But these are the numbers that SRTC came up with. And I just don't want to mess around with them because they went through their analysis and they based all their transportation planning on these numbers. And so they are updating it now. They're doing it.
Yeah,
They're doing it.
that's I just don't understand quite how they are projecting out. Are they assuming land use changes into the future growth? I just don't know.
No,
I can speak to that because I'm the current chair for SRTC.
I know that they have to do really long range planning.
Well, yeah, we've got, multiple increments so that we can time out investments. But these numbers were generated prior to the state's action with regard to increasing density and prior to the city's legislative action to increase density. So these numbers are pre those decisions. So if you were to take, and I think Jim was alluding to this, if you were to take all the actions from the state and the city, these numbers are probably light, but there's no way to go back and proof them. So these are the best numbers that we have based upon the SRTC analysis that was pre all of those other legislative actions. So I would say these numbers are light based upon what SRTC has been able to do. And they did do an extensive inventory of land and housing and development that was available in this area based upon current land use designations, not any changes.
But they don't take into account the infrastructure needs, right? That would have to go along. So that's where this is a.
This is all just based
Yeah.
on planning and zoning.
Right,
They
right.
don't.
Whether or not there's water pipes to support
Whether
that
there's,
or,
yeah, road system
street,
or anything,
yeah.
no, they did not
Okay.
consider any of that.
which is what we're trying to talk about. But I'm just saying, but what I'm saying is it's assuming growth based on infrastructure. And this is, as you're saying, one way that the infrastructure dollars could one source of funding for it.
Well, I mean, what's the other source?
Well, utility rates and other sources as well. I mean, utility dollars can be put into building out,
Water lines.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, sewer and water. There's other sources.
Okay,
Okay, well, I think we got a good path forward for today.
forward. You have a response yet? No.
Okay, any final questions or comments for Jim? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Just thanks for all your work, Jim.
Thank you.
We'll continue to be in touch on this. Okay, that takes us to miscellaneous, so just throw it out. Anybody have anything?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
What do you got?
Question. I had a notice in the mail last week saying that Primera
Oh,
is no longer going to recognize Multicare as a in-network coverage provider. And so my initial reaction was, oh dear God. And then I thought, well, what does this mean? And then I thought, well, then it means that I'm going to pay more if I continue to go to Multicare. And so do we know whether this is a short-term issue as a result of negotiations between Primera and Multicare? Or is this a long-term solution that Primera has reached that will cause all of us to say, we need to be looking at a different medical network? And so I come with all kinds of questions and no answers. But I see that we have somebody that's got all the wisdom. Ashley Cameron.
Yes, hello commissioners. So Multicare is in the process of renewing their contract with Primera. So similar to what I think the most recent one we saw happen was the University of Washington last year, where we had similar notices that went out. And so these are the required notices that Primera has to send when they are in the negotiation stages, notifying that essentially they're trying to reach an agreement, so to speak. So the goal and the hope is that we will have resolution to this soon, and there will be no disruption to our in-network versus out-of-network. And we've got a couple of months still that they're negotiating still. Primera is. Assurus recently went through this as well. So we don't have Assurus at the county, but this is fairly standard. So I would expect to have some more information in the not so distant future about what that looks like. But if for some reason an agreement is not reached, any multi-care provider would move from an in-network provider to an out-of-network provider. So again, I'm very hopeful and I anticipate having news that an agreement has been reached in the not so distant future. We have been including information in the HR news flash that goes out to our employees on Thursdays. And then the letter you all received is required to be sent by the insurance companies, which is why you received it in the mail. So as soon as I have more news, I will share it, but this is pretty standard when the renegotiation of contracts occurs with the insurance providers.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will be at my Hanford Advisory Board meeting tomorrow, so I'll be zooming in. I'll try and zoom into a portion of the morning, but I'll zoom in for the 2 p.m. Is Commissioner CUNY back tomorrow?
She won't be zooming in tomorrow either.
Okay. So just letting you know, I only have that
Sounds
meeting
good.
3 times a year, and of course it has to happen on a Tuesday. Just makes life really fun.
All right.
So I think that was all I wanted to update on.
Okay. Commissioner Jordan, anything for the good of the order?
My only updates involve diapers, so we'll do that off the record.
Sounds good. We appreciate it.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
Sorry.
And I was going to read the nurse's proclamation, but since I'll be virtual, if someone else wanted to do that, might be easier.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy
I think we have
I'm happy to do it, but
Yeah, we've got-
on.
We've got Nurses Week and then we have Provider Appreciation Day. So
you guys
I'll
cover
read
those.
one of them.
was that?
I'll read one of them.
Okay. All right. I'll
It's
take.
not about age, I'm fine.
Oh,
I'll
man.
take Nurses Week. You can do.
You're cutie,
you can do
really
Provider
had it out for you
Appreciation
last week.
Heck, I mean, I was an innocent victim.
Okay, and then, yes, Commissioner CUNY asked if I would, just mention, there is in our email boxes, the proclamation request, for, the executive director of WASAC. So if everybody wants to take a look at that, is there a day she wanted? Oh, 20, it looks like she wanted us to do it on the 28th. So
Yeah.
we can just make sure everyone gets a chance to read over that, see if there's any updates, changes, and
It's
We'll
gonna be
try to do a head
later
nod.
in the month. Is that what you said?
28th.
28th of May, okay.
yeah, so, but any opposition to that? Anybody opposed? No. Okay,
No, it looks good.
okay, so yeah, we'll go ahead and place that on for the 28th. So, any other miscellaneous items? Okay. Pat Sconce and Martha Lou, are you hearing anything? Anything going on? No? Okay. All right. Exec. Oh, we do have an executive session. Okay. Who wants to state the purpose?
You do? Sure. We have a pending potential litigation matter under RCW 4230-110-1I. That'll be the board, county commissioners, Jessica Pilgrim, myself, and Randy Bishop. 10 minutes, no action.
Good, and just for the record, it is, we'll go into executive session at 11:40. And as stated, 10 minutes and no decisions to be made at the conclusion of